Great. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming to this important session. Climate change, of course, as we know, is really one of the great challenges of this century. It has the potential to transform the entire planet and many of the ways in which we live. And of course, one of the key questions for addressing climate change is understanding how to pay for it. There's a whole series of ideas that have been proposed, whether people have talked about green bonds, people have talked about public-private partnerships, people have talked about loss and damage funds. There are many great ideas, and some of those ideas we'll hear here today. Of course, for a second, it's worth taking a second to think about why we need to pay for climate change. Climate change has the potential to be very destructive. There were big floods, and you think about the floods in Libya last fall, or regular floods in Nigeria. Even Spain in Valencia had intense floods. So climate change has the potential to be very destructive. But as we think about climate change and how we address climate change, there's also an opportunity to build societies that may be more healthy and more sustainable and more resilient. And we will bring up some of these topics here today. We actually have with us, we have a very distinguished panel. We have people that have served as ambassadors, people that have served in high levels of government, people that run industries, people that serve as pharmaceutical tech board members. We have an incredibly diverse group of people here, and also an incredibly experienced group of people here. So please join me in welcoming this distinguished panel that we have here today. I will start off by asking, I'll start off by asking Ms. Nusra Bouchret from in Morocco, if you could please give us, you've served here as a minister and in many high levels of government. Could you please give us an introduction into climate finance? Also, some of the recent outcomes of COP29, much of COP29 focused on climate finance. What have we learned about climate finance just in the last couple of months in addressing COP29, and what are the lessons moving forward?
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi de remercier les organisateurs de m'avoir associé à cet événement. Pour la 4e fois, je suis très heureuse d'être parmi vous pour traiter une thématique qui n'est pas des moindres, qui est très importante, sachant pertinemment que j'ai suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt pratiquement plus de la moitié des interventions ou des sessions qui ont été organisées ces 2 derniers jours. Et à chaque fois, le sujet des changements climatiques revenait comme crise non maîtrisée, non maîtrisable, qui nous interpelle toutes et tous à un comportement ou un changement de paradigme carrément, et qui nous interpelle aussi sur la pertinence de l'action urgente. Aujourd'hui, bien sûr, après quelques semaines de la COP 29, à laquelle j'ai participé personnellement, je voudrais d'abord remercier mon collègue ici présent de la qualité de l'accueil du Azerbaïdjan, un pays ami au Maroc, et pour la qualité de l'organisation aussi. C'était une COP qui nous a aussi montré une nouvelle culture riche, une population très accueillante. Et en parlant de la COP, peut-être je donnerai plus de temps à mon collègue pour qu'il nous mette au parfum de ce qui s'est passé dans les coulisses. Mais moi, en tant que participante, je peux aussi dire que c'est une COP à travers laquelle on a vu une vraie dynamique, des pôles qui se sont vraiment battus de façon très intense, entre les pays développés et les pays en voie de développement, il y avait une question cruciale qui est celle de la justice climatique. Comment peut-on, autant que pays en voie de développement, subir, parce que en fait, quand vous savez, l'Afrique ne génère que 4% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, mais elle subit de plein fouet tous les changements climatiques à travers les crises qu'on est en train de vivre, des inondations, des feux de forêt, et j'en passe. Aujourd'hui, le Maroc connaît des inondations dans des villes et des régions qui connaissaient pas même des pluies. Aujourd'hui, il y a des inondations, il y a une forte pluviométrie qui s'est enregistrée dans ces régions. Et la grande question, c'est malgré qu'on ne soit pas des pollueurs, nous, Africains, pourquoi on doit subir et pourquoi pourquoi on ne bénéficie pas des fonds qui sont aujourd'hui alloués dans la finance, à travers la finance climat. Je rappelle que pendant la COP de Copenhague en 2009, il était question que les pays développés mobilisent 100 milliards de dollars. Sur les 100 milliards de dollars à l'horizon 2020. Aujourd'hui, en 2022, il y a eu la mobilisation de ces fonds, mais ces fonds ne servaient pratiquement à rien par rapport aux dégâts qu'on est en train de vivre. Autre chose, la COP 29 avait un enjeu d'arrêter un nouveau objectif financier. Normalement, on devait avoir un objectif beaucoup plus ambitieux que celui que nous avons eu à la fin. Bien sûr, vous savez que les pays africains ou les pays en voie de développement et les pays vulnérables, 45 pays vulnérables sont localisés en Afrique. Et ces pays, autant que groupe africain, ils ont demandé à peu près 1300 milliards de dollars, et sur ces 1300 milliards de dollars, on n'a eu que 300 milliards de dollars. Voilà, donc ça c'est sur le plan financier. Maintenant, on peut dire qu'il y avait effectivement d'importantes pressions qui seront certainement présentées par mon collègue ici présent. Et l'autre point important pour nous, Africains, c'est la résilience, du moment que c'est la thématique qui est traitée dans cette 16e édition. Comment peut-on avoir une bonne résilience, sachant pertinemment que la résilience demande d'importantes mobilisations financières pour qu'on ait des infrastructures résilientes, une agriculture résiliente, un commerce résilient, et j'en passe. Comment peut-on arriver à être résilient sans qu'on ait forcément les ressources financières qu'il faut? La résilience, c'est l'équivalent d'une adaptation à ces changements. Donc l'adaptation climatique, en fait, il ne bénéficie pas forcément des fonds qu'il faut. Et pendant la COP 29, il y a eu peut-être d'importantes déclarations d'intention. J'espère qu'ils seront maintenus par les institutions multipartites. L'adaptation reste le cheval de bataille des Africains, bien sûr, parce que généralement, quand on finance, on est plus à l'aise à financer des projets d'atténuation qui sont sur le plan investissement rentable que des projets d'adaptation qui nous permettent d'être résilients. Maintenant, la question qui se pose aussi, faut-il aller dans un développement, bien sûr, à travers la création de projets d'atténuation, ou faut-il prioriser la vie humaine qui est aujourd'hui mise en péril à travers des actions concrètes et urgentes? Parce que si on a des morts qui sont enregistrées aujourd'hui, c'est effectivement parce qu'on n'a pas fait une politique de prévention qui mériterait d'être faite pour empêcher ce nombre de morts suite aux inondations qu'a connu aussi bien le nord que le sud, mais le sud encore plus. Voilà.
Great. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Take off my headset. Thank you so much. Shukran jaziran. So thank you. I'd like to turn now to His Excellency Farid Shafayez, who comes from Azerbaijan, who was at the last COP and played an inside role into it. Ambassador, you've served as an ambassador in your country. You run a think tank. Can you give us the on-the-ground perspective or some deep insights? What happened at COP29? How did it play out? How did things work there? Please fill us in.
Well, thank you very much. First, I would like to thank host country Morocco and also team Amadeus, Mr. Ibrahim Fassi and all his colleagues for hosting and for organizing such an event. First time in Morocco, and by the way, I found a lot of similarities between Morocco and Azerbaijan in terms of the keeping both traditions and promoting secularism. So indeed enjoying staying here. I would like also to thank my colleague from host country. She said kind words about organization of COP29. We try to do the best in terms of logistic organization, but now to the results, the outcomes. For those who has been in Tangier room, my colleague, Deputy Minister Farid Zaev, he outlined and just some of the results of COP29. I'll repeat here. First, we managed to make Article 6 operational. It was the subject of discussion for a decade. Article 6 about the carbon market, and the discussion at the previous COPs stuck. So we make breakthrough in that sense. The second, we also made operational the lost and damaged fund, and that will be available next year. So that's the second achievement. The third achievement, which is, I know some of the policymakers and experts believe that is some of them said failure, some of them said success. It's about, my colleague already mentioned, $300 billion pledge. So some people, some countries are not okay with that amount. But you know, just if you're putting in the context, the geopolitical context, we had elections in the United States, and we know that the Trump administration, what they did in 2016, basically withdrew from Paris Agreement, and they might do that again. I think that had also impact on the process of COP29. But we, as a host, it was not our task to force developed countries to give one trillion, because it's basically, indeed, it's voluntary, the agreement. So whatever we have on the paper, it's important that it is implemented. So we managed to bring that to the end point and make it, you know, it's the final document adopted. So that's 300 billion for now. So we'll see how it goes. Some of the skeptics saying that the process might be killed in the future. Again, it's, I think, up to the global actors, countries like the biggest emission, countries who make emission, United States, China, and some other countries, developed countries. So that's up to them, really, to come in the future to agreement. I think on let's say on the midterm, we have this $300 billion 2035. And there are some of issues which remains outside of the document, but this is the real battle between developed and developing countries. You know, developed countries for decades, for centuries, they are extracted oil and gas and coal. They made their countries rich, and now we're trying to tell the developing countries that they have to stop production of oil and gas. In the meantime, we see some of the, I don't want to name to engage in name calling, but some of developed countries right now, they're increasing oil and gas production, especially in Europe, in the view that the European countries, they stop buying gas from Russia, so we're looking for some other options. And some of those countries, they're saying, okay, we have oil and gas available for European market. So that's kind of dichotomy we have to deal. The second, the problem, it's also the problem of technology. So we should be realistic. The current technology, solar and wind power, it cannot sustain power in the grid. So you need just conventional source. So maybe 5 years from now, we will have that technology available, and we can replace oil or gas, especially we're speaking about gas, and maintain the power in the grid. But right now we cannot do that. So anyway, certain production, we need conventional sources, while indeed we have the wider use of the alternative energy, solar and wind. And the third issue also sometimes comes the political. It's, for example, some countries saying that you should not buy the Chinese solar panels, but because of the unfair competition. But then for developing countries, it's essential to have the projects which is economically sustainable. So we have a number of, I would say, geopolitically driven issues which we had to discuss within COP29, and I think with all the problems the host country faced, at least it tried to deliver the document which we have right now on the table. And again, we'll see how it goes next year. But again, the bottom line that it's the developed countries, the major actors, they have to pledge more financial assistance. And also another important element, it's about the private investors, about the social responsibility of global corporations like Amazon, Facebook. They're also involved in the carbon emission. They have to pay, whether it will be in the form of taxes or some other forms, but that's the probably issue for the future COPs.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview. And of course, climate finance involves both big picture global agreements like the ones that you've just mentioned, and it also involves people that are doing on the ground work, bringing projects to completion, starting projects. Mr. Bankole, you run the Nigerian Climate Innovation Center. Yeah. Can you tell us about what's happening on the ground? What's the scene on the ground in Nigeria? How are things going? And what else? Yeah, please tell us about the scene on the ground.
Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to be here to share some of the insights of what we've done in Nigeria in the past 3 to 5 years. I think one of the things we've been able to achieve in Nigeria is, first of all, to identify that climate change is real, and at the same time, it could be a business opportunity. One of the things that we've concentrated the bulk of our energy on is to look at what are the beneficial sides of the economic side of climate change. And one of them is, because we have a huge energy gap, we have seen that renewable energy projects can be able to bridge some of the challenges that we face in last mile energy, energy access. I think one of the first things our country did, was to, first of all, sign a National Climate Change Act. We signed the National Climate Change Act, but prior to that, renewable energy has always been, one of the topmost agenda on how we can look at new energy sources or sustainable energy sources that can bridge, bulk of the gaps, that we have in Nigeria. So we have, the renewable energy projects going on. We have the Nigerian electrification project currently. Over $100 million worth of, activity has happened within that sector in the last six to 8 years. We have an agency called the Rural Electrification Agency, and this agency has seen that renewable energy or solar technology can really bridge most of the gaps that we have for last mile energy access. One of the things we also did was to look at how do we activate the carbon market in Nigeria? Because again, there are many contexts to how you can have a verified and validated carbon market. And we started first by setting up some certain laws that helps to garner the interest and also help to build the understandings of how carbon market works. At the NCIC, what we've done so far is to set up, a carbon market accelerator program. We also set up a climate finance accelerator program as well. Because one thing we found out is that everywhere across the world, there's always, big ticket and big size investments. And when we look at what the global financial scenes is, speaking about, many times we are being bypassed, really because many of these countries assume we don't have the right projects, that can really work in Nigeria. But the problem usually is many of the criteria and the standards expected from developing or rather, countries such as Nigeria and other African countries really don't look sustainable. It's sort of like the EU setting a very huge map, which you're very certain that countries from Africa and other developing economies or emerging economies will find it very hard to get. So what we did to avoid that little fight, what we did was to set up a couple of climate finance accelerator projects and climate green project accelerators. And what these accelerators do is to understand the criteria that many of these green finance or green funds have set up, and then we build the capacities of the businesses, improve their packaging system, also including their deliverables and their their accountability structure, governance structure, so that they can be able to access many of these funds. In Nigeria currently, we have an environmental project called the New Map project, and the New Map project is really to look at all the different gaps around flooding, around climate-related infrastructure, from drainages, access to marine hotspots, and one of the things that we'll find out again is that across all these multiple sectors, we still cannot run away from the fact that we need to have a national plan on how we can help to bridge all these gaps. So one of the things that the presidency also did was to set up the ETP. So the ETP is the Energy Transition Plan. And the Energy Transition Plan clearly states, and we're not ashamed of it, is that because we have a huge ton of gas, then we will use gas as a transition fuel. Hopefully that by 2063 or 2060, using the AU model, then we'll be able to transit into a net zero economy. And why do we do this? Because we also understand that all the different developing nations have benefited from the use of oil and gas. But for us, we think that instead of flaring this gas multiple times, which we've been flaring for the past 60 years, it's better we convert it into usable energy that can lead us into where we need to go. So currently in Nigeria, some of the opportunities you will find is that CNG, compressed natural gas, infrastructure, is currently on the rise and is a huge investment opportunity. We've got bulk of our cars currently switching from PMS, which is gasoline, to CNG, right? And also we see that also powering multiple energy infrastructure as well. Stationary energy, and what we've done is that because we believe that empowering or rather unlocking this sector, this will create multiple jobs and at the same time create a whole lot of investment opportunity for Nigerians. Another thing that we've done lately is that we have understood also that there's a need to build green jobs. And there's also the science part of climate change. So within the NCIC, what we've supported the government with is to create multiple innovation programs around finance, multiple innovation programs around green ventures. So we took it from multiple parts. We know that SMEs form a larger part of our society. We are very entrepreneurial, within our country. We know that SMEs, again, are very transactional. And so you find multiple areas selling mini or smaller solar home systems or modular solar home systems, and most SMEs are usually the ones who handle this sort of sector. But then when we look at the innovation sector, and this is where we get to find some of those innovation-driven enterprises who are looking at new models to be able to capture, to be able to store and also distribute energy. And also we think that our circular economy could really be a a huge milestone, game changer for us. So currently we have a national circular economy, program going on, where we tend to look at multiple sectors where circular economy can be mainstream. And one of those sectors we've seen is the food and beverage sector. We are currently launching a couple of single plastic bans, right? But while we're launching some of this ban, we also consider the fact that businesses have to go on. We don't want to lose jobs. So we don't want to be like that family that pleases everybody outside and makes life hard for the for the family inside. And so we create systems that many of our food and beverage companies can transit slowly, but at the same time be able to achieve net zero possibly in the next 5 years. One of the other areas where we have begun some of our thoughts, and I hope that Doctor here can also help me with some of those thoughts, is around climate change and health. And because you see, there are so many primary health cares in multiple remote areas in Nigeria, we see that energy for health delivery and operations has to be changed. And again, we know that using fossil fuel power generators are not reliable, and so, or rather are not sustainable. So rather we opt for solar and other types of renewable energy sources. And we borrowed some thoughts also around frugal innovation. So that means by frugal innovation, and I like to quote my friend from Finland, Dr. Venkata, who talks about looking at what works in your country in the most modular terms and making sure that it becomes functional for the use and also delivery of systems within your country. We have understood that not every one of us can be like Europe, but in the context of our chaos, we have found peace, and we have also understood that we can build a thriving economy out of it. All right, so let me stop there, so that we can, so I don't take up the whole time.
That is great.
Thank you.
No, thank you. There was just an enormous amount there. I know, Mr. H.E.Mr, if you could give us also, you've been working on a bunch of on-the-ground projects in Africa. Could you please tell us what you're seeing is working in the energy sector, and then we'll move back over here to talk a little bit more about climate change and health.
Oh, okay, sorry.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I wear multiple hats. One of those hats in the energy space is more focused on the oil and gas sector as opposed to power. But I do have a high appreciation for where we are and where the direction is going. So in as much as I agree with the conversation that we need to tap into our fossils and get the most benefit out of it, I also believe that we need to look at creative ways of reducing the impact on the climate. Because as human beings, there are two things we need to thrive: food, which is energy for the body, and your oil and your gas, which is energy or power for the machinery that makes life livable, right? Now, across sub-Saharan Africa, I have come across certain key projects which are very interesting. Some are local community-based, and others more ambitious. In Ethiopia and Kenya, for example, we have a lot of projects around generating wind power. In Kenya, you have the Lake Turkana project, for example, which is focused on generating wind power. That's a very impressive project. The African Development Bank has launched the Desert to Power Initiative, for example, which is a $20 billion project aimed at generating 10,000 megawatts of power for 250 million people. You also have the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam project, which is it's taking a while to get off the ground because some of the challenges it faces mainly geopolitical issues with Egypt and Sudan and so on. But it seems like they've gotten there, so we'll see how that plays out. A lot of the local-based community projects you find in Nigeria and Zambia and Tanzania are off-grid mini solar solutions, which seems to be doing very well in Nigeria, for example, with the introduction of the distribution companies, the DISCOs. I believe banks will agree with me on that. So you see a lot of interest and a lot of the deliberate localization of solutions in this regard. Another ambitious project was a launch of the African Union project for the Great Green Wall Initiative, which is targeted at building or planting trees from Senegal to Djibouti across the Sahel, which is a great initiative. However, It's been plagued with certain challenges, including, again, geopolitical issues, political instability, delays, implementation issues with the selection of the species of trees to plant in certain regions and so on. So even though there's high interest and there's a lot of projects, I guess, like everything, there are pros and cons. Hopefully the pros outweigh the cons, and then we see some results.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Actually, from the United States and in the U.S., they built a green wall from Texas to Montana in the late 1930s. There were huge dust storms in the United States in the 1930s, and they actually built the what they called the Great American Shelter Belt that went from Texas to Montana or North Dakota in the central part of the country. But you mentioned that that there are things that people cannot live without, and that's food and energy. Of course, another thing that people cannot live without is health. And here we have Dr. Kathal Labiati. If you could, and you're a board member of some American publicly traded companies. You have an MD. Can you give us an introduction into climate change and health, and what we need to do to make climate healthcare, climate-related health finance bankable?
Yeah. Do you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you for the opportunity to bring healthcare to the attention of policymakers and also financiers who are interested in investing in climate finance, and to the attention of the audience as well. I am a strong believer that health and climate change should not be treated as two separate policy domains. I believe that these things are interconnected, and that establishing the connection between climate change and health or healthcare delivery could only foster more significant climate action. And what I mean by climate action is more than just decarbonization of supply chains, drug production supply chains, pharmaceuticals. What I mean is, if you look at the sustainable policies that improve the quality of the air from harmful pollutants, some models that have been done in the US will show that it will translate in better health. For example, you will see lower mortality rates. You will see some cost savings from hospitalization due to respiratory diseases such as asthma or some cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks. It will translate also into better productivity, because the model shows that there are less work days lost. So this is, we know that it works. We know that there is a connection. So the missing part is finance. For the emerging economies, as Mr. Ambassador has mentioned, we are lacking the funding. So we need to convince. We are not high emitters, except for maybe Nigeria, but we need to convince the financiers. I do believe that climate or health-oriented climate finance could be very well allocated and could serve the purpose of building sustainable and resilient healthcare systems. For instance, by helping countries respond to emergencies, to outbreaks. We know that climate change will cause more infectious disease outbreaks, because we know that the temperatures of the air and the water in the rivers and so on is increasing, and so we will see more waterborne infectious diseases, and we will see more airborne or vector-borne infectious diseases, cholera, malaria, etc. those things need to be treated by products. So we need transfer of technology, and we need money for that. The waterborne diseases, UNICEF says that, I don't remember exactly the figure, but it's very significant in children less than 5 years. And so we need to screen for those waterborne diseases and diagnose them. And so emerging economies need money to make available some new methods to detect the waterborne in the wastewater. For example, we need to make available the new genomic sequencing, and we have seen in COVID that this is very time critical, and so not all the countries in Africa have access to it. So these are just some examples that show you how we can build more resilience in the healthcare systems. Perhaps if there is, I came here with 2 objectives to convince you about the triangle of the relation between climate change, health, and the importance of finance to build sustainable healthcare systems. And my other objective is to advocate for something called blended finance, which is a mix of public finance and private and philanthropic. And I do have 3 projects, 3 examples of projects where we can use this blended finance. So if time allows it, I would like to describe those and share those examples. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That was extremely interesting. I'd like to turn now to Mr. Bill Ramel. You've served as a member of Parliament in Great Britain and in the Ministry of Defense. You're from Great Britain. You are here in Africa. Can you tell us what are the commonalities between, let's say, developed economies and emerging economies in terms of building resilience in a climate program, and what came out of COP29 with respect to that?
Thank you very much. And I served as a foreign minister and education minister as well, so it's broader than defense. I want to say congratulations to Morocco and to the organizers through the Amadeus Foundation for an excellent conference. But I want to start by, if I can, pushing back on the ambassador from Azerbaijan. I do it in a friendly fashion. And your argument, and I'm paraphrasing as I understood it, was we in the West have pillaged oil, gas and coal and got the benefits, and now we're asking you not to do the same. And I get the argument, but when we prioritized oil, gas and coal, we did not know what all of us know today. But we do know in the developed world and the developing world, we know the impact on the environment. So I think this is a joint challenge and a joint responsibility. And that means effort, work, and also sacrifices, and there are some sacrifices across the board. But my starting point is there is common ground between emerging and developed economies with regard to tackling climate change. And it's the political challenge of using policy and finance to make the transition to climate resilience and to make it easier to take our peoples with us. And if you will, facing down the populists who want to oppose the very notion of climate change's existence. We all approach this, and that's inevitable from a national perspective. In my country, the only way we keep the British people safe from extreme weather, economic destruction, and destruction of nature is to get the world to act. Now, the previous government, and I was a member of the last Labour government, I'm a supporter of this one, but the previous Conservative government said we're only creating about a 1% of global emissions, so they use that as an excuse for inaction. But climate change and climate impact knows no national borders, and our only hope is for collective international action. And that's where COP29, and there are criticisms that can be made, but I think it did make progress. The 11th hour deal is a step forward. We know the reality is that there's no route to a stable climate without supporting developing countries to embrace the clean energy revolution, and the $300 billion that was committed is a trebling on previous existence commitments, and that will help poorer countries to get the finance they need to decarbonise their economies and protect their populations. The deal that was struck is the equivalent of removing the emissions of about 1 billion cars across the planet. So it's no mean feat. I think as well the finance deal that was agreed also reflects a new global landscape where traditional donors will be joined by big emitters such as China to help fund the transition, and I think that's the right way forward and reflects the modern world. There are criticisms, I know, within the developing world, but the deal that was struck comes at a time of massive pressures on public finances, and the finance goal, along with the agreements at Baku on carbon markets and the mobilisation of the private sector, are an essential part of the roadmap moving forward. And within that, private finance, and we've touched upon this, is going to be absolutely fundamental to achieving those objectives. Public budgets across the board are strained, and borrowing conditions for emerging market sovereigns have tightened. So establishing the right climate policies, including carbon pricing, I think remains critical. Climate policies and finances are complementary, and better policies incentivise private investment, which helps us to achieve policy objectives. I'll end with this though. I think there is hope. The market for sustainable finance in emerging markets and the developing economies is advancing fast as private investors increasingly look for investments with a positive climate impact. And I think what happened at COP29 in delivering a big step forward in resources, not enough as people maybe would have wanted, but I think helps us move in that direction.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that was very insightful. I'd like to continue on the sort of geopolitics side and move to Patrick Simonet. You're the European Union Special Envoy for the Mediterranean. Can you give us, given your extensive diplomatic experience, how can countries work across the Mediterranean work together to address climate change? And what financial instruments do you see that are needed to provide meaningful climate action?
Thank you so much. Maybe for the sake of cultural diversity, will I speak in French also to express solidarity with my friend, the minister from Morocco? Just to give you a bit of time to put your headsets. Écoutez, merci beaucoup pour cette, pour d'abord l'invitation. Effectivement, je crois que ça a du sens aussi de se retrouver au Maroc après la COP 22, si je me trompe pas, de 2016, qui avait été un moment assez important aussi dans la prise de conscience autour des questions climatiques. Donc vraiment infiniment reconnaissant de cette invitation. Je ne suis pas un expert, comme vous l'avez mentionné, de questions de climat. J'essaye de voir ces questions sous un angle politique. Et mon domaine d'expertise, mon domaine de travail, c'est la Méditerranée. Donc permettez-moi de regarder un peu cette question-là sous l'angle de la Méditerranée. Est-ce qu'elle offre comme opportunité de coopération ensemble? Alors, la première question que vous m'aviez posée, c'est de savoir si les pays de la région, de cette région méditerranéenne, ont l'habitude de travailler ensemble sur la question climatique. Alors, il y a bien évidemment des choses à faire, mais il y a beaucoup de choses très intéressantes qui se font. Je crois que par exemple, il y a l'Union pour la Méditerranée qui a un certain nombre de domaines de compétences sur cette question-là et qui cherche à justement avoir des activités plus régionales, de développer le commerce intra-régional. Vous savez que cette région malheureusement est assez peu intégrée sur le plan commercial, c'est-à-dire que 6% du commerce global des pays de la région méditerranéenne se fait avec leurs voisins, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a encore beaucoup de choses à faire pour essayer de créer des ponts entre les différents pays de la région. Et comme vous le savez, le premier partenaire économique et commercial reste l'Union européenne. Ça veut dire que nous avons des pays qui ont plus tendance à exporter et importer en direction et en provenance de l'Union européenne qu'entre eux. Donc ça, c'est vraiment, je pense, un enjeu qui est de développement régional. En tant qu'Union européenne, nous cherchons à renforcer nos partenariats. Nous avons un partenariat très fort avec le Maroc, notamment un partenariat que nous avons signé récemment qui s'appelle le partenariat vert, donc vraiment sur les questions de résilience climatique et d'énergie renouvelable. Mais effectivement, il faudrait trouver aussi une vision régionale par laquelle l'ensemble de la région pourrait se mettre à travailler sur cette question-là. Alors, il y a un moment important pour l'Union européenne, c'est un changement de leadership. Vous avez sans doute constaté. Donc, on a une nouvelle Commission européenne, on a un nouveau leadership européen, et l'annonce par la présidente de la Commission européenne d'un pacte pour la Méditerranée et aussi d'une nouvelle stratégie pour le Moyen-Orient, pour les aspects plus diplomatiques et politiques. Donc il y a une opportunité aujourd'hui d'aller un peu plus loin sur ces questions de climat et d'énergie renouvelable. Alors il y a pour nous fondamentalement pour cette question, enfin, ce pacte méditerranéen, deux domaines, deux secteurs qui nous paraissent représenter un potentiel important en matière de coopération, d'échange et d'investissement dans les deux sens. C'est le domaine digital, hein, sur lequel il y a des choses déjà qui se passent, et bien sûr le domaine de l'énergie renouvelable. Je pense que le plan pour la Méditerranée, le pacte pour la Méditerranée sera discuté avec les partenaires, avec le Maroc, avec les autres partenaires méditerranéens au courant de l'année prochaine, et il sera matérialisé, finalisé l'année prochaine. Mais d'ores et déjà, je pense qu'on peut dire que, et la commissaire pour la Méditerranée, puisqu'on aura pour la première fois dans l'histoire de l'Union européenne une commissaire en charge de la Méditerranée, qui s'appelle Madame H.E.Mrs, a déjà annoncé que l'énergie renouvelable sera un pilier de son action. Et elle a vraiment pris le ferme engagement de faire le maximum en termes de commerce et d'investissement. Alors, ce qu'on peut dire déjà, c'est l'idée de faire de cette région, et en particulier du Royaume du Maroc, qui est un pilier, un leader en matière de climat et d'énergie renouvelable, d'en faire un hub de commerce d'énergie renouvelable. Vous avez un marché, le marché européen, qui est tout près, qui a besoin, on l'a signalé, qui a des besoins d'importation d'énergie renouvelable, d'électricité ou d'hydrogène. Vous avez le marché africain qui est tout près. Et donc il faudrait essayer d'intégrer ces différents marchés en utilisant la Méditerranée comme un hub de commerce. Ce qu'on voudrait faire aussi très, très clairement, c'est développer les infrastructures d'interconnexion au niveau électrique et au niveau commerce de l'hydrogène vert. Et enfin, c'est un aspect qui est important aussi pour vous et pour nous, c'est développer les possibilités de ce qu'on appelle en anglais clean tech manufacturing, c'est-à-dire d'avoir la possibilité aussi de renforcer la fabrication des technologies nouvelles en matière d'énergie, que sont, alors je ne suis pas expert, mais que sont les câbles, les turbines wind turbines, je ne sais pas comment on dit en français, ou les électrolyseurs, toutes ces choses-là qui sont importantes pour l'économie des pays et qui permettraient aussi, et là il y a véritablement une perspective européenne, de ce qu'on appelle rapprocher les chaînes de valeur et intégrer beaucoup plus, en termes de chaînes de valeur, la zone sud méditerranéenne et l'Europe. Alors, les financements, vous posiez la question des financements, je ne suis pas un expert de financement, mais ce qu'on a fait, on ne part pas de rien en fait. Hein. On a déjà sur la Méditerranée un instrument important qui est ce qu'on appelle la Economic and Investment Plan, vous voyez que souvent on revient à des expressions anglaises, mais qui est en fait qui sont des financements, enfin des financements privés et publics qui sont mis ensemble. L'Europe, en fait, essentiellement utilise des instruments de garantie pour permettre de financer des projets avec des opérateurs privés qui, sans garantie, peut-être n'investiraient pas. Donc ça s'est fait beaucoup et ça va probablement continuer. Travailler avec les institutions financières internationales, notamment celles qui sont européennes, mais pas que. Et donc de développer effectivement une certaine forme d'innovation au niveau financier, L'important étant quand même de monter en puissance dans la mise à disposition des financements. Et là, effectivement, l'engagement pris avec la COP 29 est important. Vous m'aviez aussi posé la question des difficultés, des enjeux dans cette perspective-là. Les enjeux, ils sont bien évidemment, comme partout, comme en Europe, comme partout, des enjeux de régulation. C'est-à-dire l'importance d'avoir des systèmes régulatoires qui soient propices à l'investissement, au développement du secteur privé. Donc ça, c'est des choses, je pense qu'on a la chance ici d'être au Maroc, qui, encore une fois, a montré un dynamisme important de ce côté-là, mais c'est pas vrai je crois que on peut le dire pour tous les pays de la région. Donc bien évidemment, il y a cet aspect de régulation. Il y a l'aspect de planification, qui est un aspect purement politique, c'est-à-dire que les gouvernements de la région prennent clairement l'engagement politique d'aller dans cette direction du développement des énergies renouvelables et de la lutte contre le changement climatique. Encore une fois, le Maroc est pour nous un partenaire important parce qu'il a une vraie stratégie sur le changement climatique et sur le développement de l'énergie renouvelable. Encore une fois, la stratégie qui fonde le partenariat vert que l'Europe a avec le Maroc. Mais encore une fois, il y a définitivement la dimension régionale qui est à trouver les façons, on parle d'interconnexion, il est évident que pour ça, il faut discuter aussi des questions politiques. Hein. On n'arrivera pas probablement à une intégration de ces marchés énergétiques sans une désescalade, sans une baisse des tensions politiques, sans un retour vers une stabilité politique et économique qui permettront aux investisseurs qui sont déterminants dans ce processus-là de venir et d'investir. Donc voilà, pour nous, c'est véritablement, et pour la nouvelle commission qui se prépare, qui rentre en vigueur, j'allais dire, lundi prochain, le 1er décembre, c'est vraiment un enjeu de taille de take renewable energy to the next level. Merci.
Great. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. That was great. That was fantastic. I guess, the next thing I would like to do is move to outcomes. What outcomes would we like to see? And I will start off with Ms. Nusa, Your Excellency Nusa. Could you please tell us what outcomes, quels résultats vous souhaitez voir pour Morocco, for Africa? What would you like to see moving forward for results?
Merci beaucoup d'avoir redonné la parole et si vous permettez quelques pistes de réflexion permettant d'améliorer, je dirais, l'accès au financement, et je souligne l'accès au financement. J'aimerais peut-être compléter ce que vient de dire mon collègue concernant où est-ce qu'on est, où est-ce qu'on va et comment on va. En fait, c'est ça. Et le mot juste, c'est en fait l'intégration des politiques publiques. Et je pense que Sa Majesté, le roi Mohammed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, pendant la COP 22, a bien démontré que ces sujets concernant l'intégration des politiques publiques, notamment en Afrique, était la solution. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, on ne pourrait pas travailler de façon cloisonnée sans qu'on ait une plateforme qui intègre un peu les soucis des pays en voie de développement, notamment les pays du continent africain. Et Sa Majesté, le roi Mohammed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, a lancé pendant la COP 22, je rappelle, le premier sommet africain du climat. Et c'était un sommet où tous les chefs d'État se sont engagés et ils ont déclaré aussi que la question climatique devrait être résolue de façon collective dans la solidarité et la coopération et de façon responsable et solidaire. Et ça, c'est très important. Aussi, pendant la COP22, il y avait des initiatives très importantes qui ont été lancées par Sa Majesté le roi Mohammed VI, que Dieu l'assiste, concernant la mise en place de 3 commissions. C'est la commission de Sahel, la commission des îles Seychelles et la commission... en tout cas, ça reviendra, la 3e commission, et c'était dans l'objectif aussi de produire des mécanismes et des outils qui permettraient à ces régions qui ont les mêmes problématiques climatiques, comme la région de Sahel et les îles insulaires, de trouver des solutions collectives et solidaires. Et ça, c'était un point de démarrage, peut-être pour la mise en place de l'accord de Paris, qui était très important et très intéressant par rapport au continent africain. Toujours dans le même sens, quand on travaille dans l'intégration au niveau régional, on a encore plus de force de frappe et de force de proposition par rapport aux pays développés. C'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui, on a pu plaidoyer pendant la rencontre sur la sécurité alimentaire et le continent africain a parlé d'une même et seule voix pour avoir un peu les appuis et le soutien qu'il faut pour assurer la sécurité alimentaire. Donc ça, c'est des exemples que je vous donne par rapport à tout le leadership qui a été porté par Sa Majesté, le roi Mohammed VI, pour faire en fait du continent africain un continent qui cherche à renforcer sa résilience dans l'intégration. Et en même temps, le Maroc, aujourd'hui, il faut dire ce qui va et ce qui va pas. On est fiers d'être champion de l'Afrique sur ces questions climatiques. On est fiers aussi d'avoir été classé 8e pays par rapport à ces questions concernant les changements climatiques en 2024. Et ça vient d'une vision éclairée qui est portée par notre leader, Sa Majesté, et qui fait de ces changements climatiques la priorité des priorités. Aujourd'hui, si le Maroc s'engage à consommer ou à produire 54% de l'énergie à travers les énergies renouvelables, c'est un chantier, je pense, ou c'est un projet qui devrait être salué, et aussi c'est un projet qui devrait être appuyé et soutenu. Parce que les pays en voie de développement, ils ont la charge d'investir dans des projets propres. Ils ont aussi la malchance d'être impactés beaucoup plus que le Nord par rapport à tout ce qui est émissions atmosphériques dues au carbone et autres gaz. Et quand on voit un peu ce qui est aujourd'hui mobilisé pour que ces pays et aussi le Maroc puissent en fait bénéficier des fonds qui sont mobilisés à cet effet, on voit que les pourcentages sont très je dirais décevants. Pourquoi ne pas le dire? Et ça, nous pousse à poser des questions sur ce qui se passe réellement. Est-ce qu'on est en train de vivre une certaine schizophrénie par rapport à ce qu'on veut et ce qu'on veut pas? Aujourd'hui, si on veut sauvegarder la planète, il va falloir passer par la sauvegarde de l'Afrique d'abord, qui constitue en fait une solution, parce que il faut qu'on change aussi notre narrative. Il ne faut pas qu'on se présente toujours comme un maillon faible qui a besoin toujours de l'aide d'autres pays pour qu'ils puissent être en fait résilient que ce qu'il est aujourd'hui. Et je terminerai par cette dernière phrase. Aujourd'hui, l'Afrique, c'est une solution, je dirais, mondiale pour ce qui se passe à l'échelle de la planète. Si on ne travaille pas ensemble, en évitant un petit peu toutes ces polémiques, toute cette idéologie et populisme par rapport à ce qu'on est en train de vivre au niveau des COP, et on s'acharne à trouver des solutions réelles main dans la main, nord-sud, dans cette vision d'intégration. Je pense que au lieu d'aller sur des projets prochainement, au lieu d'aller sur des projets d'atténuation et d'adaptation, on va aller directement vers la mobilisation des fonds pertes et dommages, parce qu'on aura beaucoup de pertes sur la main, et ça sera bien entendu une responsabilité partagée. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. That was très fantastique. I could not have. No, that was great to hear that Africa is the solution. So thank you. I want to maybe just turn here to Mr. Bancol. You've talked about climate, like on the ground, climate finance. What do startups, what do businesses, from your perspective in Africa, need to be successful? What do you need?
So I'm going to keep it short, right? I think what we need is going to be a dedicated financing model, right? A mixture of blended finance, a mixture of patient finance, but most importantly, I think that a dedicated channel is what we're currently working at now in Nigeria. And this is also an invitation for those who would like to join us, because we have considered, because we see that commercial banks are they are divided between, should we focus too much on fossil fuel, which is also a lucrative market for many of them, or should we dedicate our financing to green economy? And so for that, a couple of colleagues and I, we thought that it would make absolutely immense sense if we set up a green bank. And the essence of doing this is that there is a retail side of the green economy in Nigeria. Like I said, there are multiple SMEs trading in multiple green, green commodities, plastics, energy, food waste, agric waste. There are multiple things that SMEs are dealing with on the retail side. And there are also multiple projects currently emerging in Nigeria. Large-scale project. There's the Evergreen project, which is, dedicated special economic zones that are supposed to foster green economy activities in Nigeria. There are energy projects. There are circular economy projects, water projects. And we think that a dedicated green bank, which, again, will help to handle both capital investment, sustainable capital, and as well as retail market as well. So for us, we think that in another 1 or 2 years, right, with the right infrastructure in place, which we are currently working at, we think that we will get our green bank off the ground. And we all invite you, if you would like to join us in this very wonderful trade. Thank you.
Sorry, banks. But you said patient financing, right? So what do you mean? Long-term financing, very low interest rates?
Yes, a mixture of both. Right?
Because I just wanted to clarify.
We need the finance that will not be pressured.
Yeah, exactly.
To quickly pay back. So some form of moratorium around the period of receiving the finance, working with the finance, and then earning the interest of the finance. So we need some level of moratorium around.
Do African financial institutions have the ability to provide that, or do we have to look outside again?
I think the AFDB and multiple other African agencies around financing businesses have the capacity to help us. We can do a mixture of African finance, and we can also do a mixture also of maybe EU or the US finance. There are multiple green banks in the US. One of the most notable EU green bank that I know is NEFCO, which is a mixture of Finland and quite a number of other Nordic, partners. So we think that a conglomerate of this experienced green banks can also, benefit from the untapped opportunities for green financing in Africa, not just Nigeria. Thank you.
Well, on the subject of finance and blended finance, Dr. Labiati, I know you have looked at blended finance as a way to advance health projects. Can you maybe give us some insights into what blended finance is, how it works, and maybe some examples of it working in the client? Yes.
Yes, sure. I think that my co-panelists could confirm that I did not attend COP29 in Azerbaijan, unfortunately, but I read the news, as everyone does these days. And there was a strong call at the COP29 to move, for the emerging economies, to move away completely from loans, because non-concessional loans perpetuate the debt trap in the emerging economy. So let's forget about loans. If we forget about loans, then we will be faced with two solutions: either the public funds, special public special big public funds that are dedicated to climate finance across all sectors, including mine, which is healthcare, and I will very soon advocate for it. And private finance is another option. I think that at the COP29 there was strong calls to scale up private finance, because we just realized that the loans do not work. The public institutional from MDBs, from the multilateral development banks, and from the big funds dedicated to healthcare is very small, 9%. We have realized that the adaptation, the money that goes to the adaptation for climate change, it's only a small portion. Emerging economies are very hit by climate change, and so they see damages across their infrastructure. And there is Her Excellency, Madame Nuzha Bouchareb could maybe correct me on that or elaborate more if she feels like it. There is the damage and loss fund is voluntary. It is not mandatory for developing nations to put money on that fund. And emerging economies need to re-establish the infrastructure that is being cut by the tornadoes and the hurricanes and the floodings and all this. I mean, all this just to say that we are paying really the heavy price, while others are the high emitters. In any case, I am here, as I mentioned, to strongly advocate for the blended finance. I am a capitalist, not a wild capitalist, but a capitalist. I do believe that when you ask an investor to put money and that you promise them a return on investment, and that you explain to an investor that a project is de-risked, or that there is a kind of shared risk, okay, risk-sharing mechanisms, this investor will put money on the table. So blended finance, for me, is the solution across all sectors. So let me, because I am in healthcare, and I know that climate change will bring some nasty things as pandemics. Everyone knows now the pandemics, infectious diseases, and others. And I will stick just to the infectious diseases. I'd like blended finance to go to preparedness for pandemics. And I would like to see blended finance go, for example, more specifically, to small local manufacturings in countries in Africa. Let's say the funder can identify the product that it would like to put money on, and dedicate the money to the small local manufacturer, and enable this local manufacturer to use the proceeds to bring the manufacturing at scale. That's number one. This is very good for the anti-infective medicines, for instance. My second example is very suitable for vaccines. So the money from blended finance goes to mobilizing the procurement and the supply of big bulks of vaccines. Big bulks of vaccines. Why I'm speaking about the big bulks? Because this will bring down the costs up to 60%. It works. It has been tested elsewhere. It works. That's my second example. And we would love to see some transfer of technology as well. Number three, the third example, I like it because it's a bit sophisticated. It has been tested during the COVID with Moderna and with Pfizer, big players. What did we do? Our government, worldwide, they have taken money from some special funds Novavax, blah, blah, blah. In Morocco, there was a special fund as well, and elsewhere. And they have funded some, how do we call this, agreement or AMCs. Let me, some purchase.
At the time, and we only have about 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get everyone to give us some final thoughts on this. So I'm just going to close out with a final three who haven't spoken. I'll start with Mr. Shaif. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Can you just give us a couple minutes thoughts, closing out what we've learned, some lessons from COP29 regarding finance, particularly what the next step, outcomes moving forward.
Yeah, well, a lot of conversation about financing. So very briefly, taking into account the time constraints, I think what can be a solution, and speaking about some of my colleagues spoke about loans, etc. I think it's important, and was the subject of COP29. It's public-private partnerships. And on the example of Azerbaijan, I just would like to highlight, we brought three companies, multilateral companies, Rich Petroleum, some good words for my colleague from UK, and Masdar and Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia and Emirates to produce solar, wind. Here the role of the government is to create the favorable conditions for FDI, investment safety, and when the private money coming. So this is the essential for how we advance. I know for developing countries, it's sometimes hard to get loan. That's the one issue. The second, I think we are not talking about consumption. We're talking about production, change of production, alternative energy. But I think this is the issue. Look, just if we take Sweden, the home country of Greta Thunberg, the average suite, if we consume everything like average suite, we need 3 planets like Earth. So at a certain point, we really should come down not only to the sources, alternative energy sources, but how we consume. And the third issue is technology. I think there's not much conversation about some of technologies, even the traditional, we talked previously. For example, when scholars discovered that the freons in the refrigerators, they damage ozone layer, there was no suggestion to get rid of refrigerators or air conditioners, but the focus of was how to replace cooling agent, and we succeeded. So it's quite successful example how investment in technologies help just traditional equipments to work efficiently. I think so. This is 3 direction: technology, consumption, and public-private partnership. That will be the tips which we focus.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Patrick Simonet, I'm going to ask you, in terms of outcomes and working together, if you could give us 1 or 2 outcomes you would like to see in the Mediterranean region moving forward in climate, what would that be?
Thanks. No, sorry. I think the instruments are there. I mean, I'm not an expert of that, but you have everything: green bonds, public-private partnership. We are all using that. You have private investment. Again, we are banking a lot on private investment and leveraging and guaranteeing and all that. So all in my sense, but not being an expert, again, I think we have all the instruments out there. What we're missing is the political will. The political will, you have it in a country like the Kingdom of Morocco. Again, 24% of the energy mix for renewable. You have it in Egypt, but in many countries where you don't feel there's the equivalent political will in place. So my wish would be that if we can have that political will, then I think the money will follow the political lead. Then again, for EU and the Mediterranean, it's a no-brainer. You have the best possible condition, the lowest cost for renewable energy production in this region. so we can turn this region as a hub. It will be good for decarbonization of our respective economies. It will be good for our trade. It will be good for the investment, and it will be good also for jobs, for the use of those countries, and also for the use of Europe to feel catered. I think another blind spot for me is North Africa, Africa, and I'm very happy that we are all together like that, because that's really where we need to work. I mean, it's fine to connect better the two shores of the Mediterranean, but we need also to connect with with sub-Saharan Africa, with the Atlantic coast, Central Africa, Horn of Africa, and all that. So my wish is that we find ways to, get away with this blind spot where we need to find the interconnections between Africa and North Africa and then Europe. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. And Bill Ramel, can you give us just, in your view, what outcomes would you like to see moving forward in the next years ahead?
I think, to give the need for brevity, three. One, a real effort, mobilization of private finance to support the developing world in facing up to this challenge. And that means looking at the aid rules in terms of public-private partnerships, and it needs a really hard-headed focus on priorities. And I think more aid funding needs to go towards mobilizing private finance to support the developing world than has historically been the case. Secondly, a renewed push on renewables, which is now the cheapest form of energy source across the planet. The ambassador made the point about connectivity and enduring supplies throughout the days and months. We need to work at that in terms of innovation. But I'm struck by the fact that if you look at solar, for example, the costs have fallen by a factor of 5,000 over 60 years. This really is part of the way forward, and we've got to drive it very strongly. The final outcome is actually about politics, and it's politics across the developed and the developing world, because there are a whole host of people, populists, who are intrinsically opposing movement on climate change. And we've got a juggernaut coming down the road with the second Trump presidency that's going to make that even more difficult. And we need data to communicate the effects of not acting on climate change and the real world, real people consequences of not doing so, to galvanize the political will to keep moving forward on this crucially important agenda.
We have time for one or two questions from the audience, and so let me answer those. Yes, right here, and then yes, please.
Hi, I'm Taha Namri. I'm a PhD student in economics, working on the economic impacts of climate change in Africa. Well, I wanted to add a key sector which we should invest on, especially it's the sustainable agriculture, because I believe that the climate vulnerability in Africa is due to the dependency on the rain-fed agriculture. And this agriculture is very dependent on climate. So if we can invest in sustainable agriculture, incorporating new technologies to make this sector more resilient to climate, it will be good. And also we should invest in human capital that could create these technologies and attract more investors in this sector. And thank you.
Thank you, and I think there's a gentleman back there with his hand up, and then one over there. So yeah, here and then over there, if we can do that.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Patrick Stevenson, and I'm a development economist. So I've had a lot of things, but I guess my question is, when something is a problem, it has to become a priority, right? When you combine the defense spending of the G20 countries, I perhaps, you know, I'm tempted to believe that something like defense, which some may argue is a response to a man-made or a, problem that we have created, seems to be getting a lot more attention than something like climate change, which is not man-made, right? So really, and I do hear when, His Excellency Rommel, for example, indicates, the commitment that have come out of, Baku, 300 billion, better than 100 billion. There are questions around the 100 billion, things being double counted, etc. But let's put that aside. 300 billion as against what need? And if I combine the defense spending of G20 countries, it pales, not in comparison to what we have to spend on climate action up until 2035. So how do we reconcile that? That's the question.
That is an incredibly important question, the role that we spend on defense funding versus other funding. And while I personally would love to spend the next hour talking about this, I've been told by the organizers that we are out of time. So I've been told that we're past our time allotted. This has been an incredibly stimulating discussion, and I think that I've been told we have to close it out. So I'm sorry that I wish we could keep going. Please meet us in the halls, and we can continue asking these questions. I hope everyone from this panel can. I would love to keep asking questions, and please, if everyone from the panel can come and meet in the halls afterwards, we can ask these questions.
I have one more question, please.
Thank you. Thank you.